Okay, everybody, this is Sue Frederick, and it is our monthly Patreon group meeting in September of 2024. And we're going to close our eyes and begin with a pray in. Let's take a deep breath. And tonight, as we focus on our soul agreements with others, it's so important for us to be able to see our loving and our troublesome relationships from the soul's perspective. That is where healing happens. That is where we find our sacred power and our sacred ability to love unconditionally. And with that in mind, we know that all divine beings will be with us tonight, helping inform us about these purposes of relationships on earth, and also that our departed loved ones are with us because they are certainly part of our soul agreements, and they are certainly souls who've broken our hearts in the past. And as if you're here, you know that they're also our greatest teachers and our greatest healers. And so we are so grateful for them. And so it is. All right. So, I just wanted, and don't forget you have to unmute. Tonight we're going to talk about soul agreements, and I was really happy because I got to teach a class on that a few weeks ago, and it was so enlightening and fun for everyone, including me. Because if there is one thing on earth that is constantly going to be a challenge for us, it is our relationships with people, with others, whether it's in spirit or in human form. And many of us have, had departed loved ones. And so they're definitely a primary soul agreement that we agreed to before the lifetime began, with the purpose of our highest good and our highest growth, and theirs as well. And so we also know that those souls who are still here on earth, who we have a problem with or a great loving relationship with, that's all on purpose, and that there is something we are trying to learn from that as well. So we're going to get to that, and I have some good questions about that already. But I wanted to start with something more fun, actually, is that a couple hours ago, I did an interview again with Alison Dubois, and it'll air on Tuesday. And she wanted me to talk about the energy of 2025, which starts in January. So I hadn't yet really felt into that, and reflected on all the numbers of that year. And so it was my homework to go in and do that. And it was so cool. And I want to share it with all of you. It's kind of like the first broadcast of talking about the numbers of 2025. And so here's what I get. So as we know that 2025, when you digit it in numerology, is a 9 universal year. And you all are geniuses, and you know that 9 is a culmination of everything that's been learned in a last 9-year cycle. Our universal cycle that will be ending in 2025 started in 2017. And if we think of that cycle as coming to a completion next year, I mean, you just have to marvel at the divine order of the universe, that all the conflict and problems we've had in the world that really kind of launched themselves around 2016, intensified during COVID, and have continued. This cycle, I think we're going to be happy to put this to bed. And as I felt into it and really took apart the numbers, here's what I see. When you look at the year 2025, you want to look at different components of it. And of course, it starts with the 2, and 2 is always calling us to connect with each other and to use our sensitivity to help and heal. And then the 0 is called a potentiator, meaning that it strengthens the numbers around us. So the number following it is the 2 again. Right there is a message about the 20,000s that we're in. all calling us to connect with each other and strengthen our connection, our compassion and cooperation, all the numbers of two. And then we squeeze together those two for 2025, and we have a 22 in that configuration. And the 22, as you all know, is calling us to shift our consciousness to a higher level. Well, we got that right. I mean, 2020 was a 22 in there, and that's really launched us in a whole new trajectory, for better or worse, depending on our point of view. And then in 2025, coming up in January, it ends in the number 5. And 5 is a number of dramatic expansion and change and courage. And so when we look at all the components of this upcoming 9-year, it actually feels very good to me. It feels like 9 has the ability to bring us to a higher frequency of human life on Earth, especially because it's a culmination, but also because it's a call to all of us to step up to our higher selves. You know, when you're a 9 path, I always say, oh, well, it's a final lifetime for you. You know, you're really tying up all the loose ends and trying to step up to your compassion and your love. And here we universally go into that 9-year. And so as humans, it's kind of the end of an old cycle, and we are being all called to step up to compassion and humanitarianism and highest good. So when people think of 2025, often, you know, even Allison, I was on her podcast and she wanted to talk about death and dying and gloom. You know, she's an 8 path, and we joke about it. You know, she's feeling that for the 9 personal year, and I'm feeling enlightened consciousness, forgiveness, compassion. So as we all know, free will and destiny have a great interplay here on Earth. And when we look to the future, it's never going to be just what was destined, even in our own personal lives. In our own personal lives, we're always, every single day, doing a complex play balance between free will and destiny. And so we look at 2025, and under all of those, thinking about all the things I've just talked about, there's a huge choice for humanity. It is the choice of, are we really going to close out this 9-year cycle by learning forgiveness, love, compassion, and a higher expression of humanity on Earth? Or will the 9 tear us apart and end our ability to connect? Well, I don't believe in that aspect of it. I really don't, because when I even look back at my own 9-year cycles that I've mapped out, and yours as well, we can all see that when we hit a 9-year, it might be hard, might have heartbreak, might have disappointment, but after that comes the new and better cycle. And that's the key here. Whatever happens in 2025, it's the end of the old, and it opens us up to the best unfolding of human consciousness to begin in 2026, when we begin a new cycle, a 1-year. So on that note, any questions about 2025? Okay, so we will then, oh, Mary has a question. Yes, Mary?
Okay, can you repeat that about free will and destiny?
Yeah, very important thing. That as humans here on Earth, we have our soul plan, our soul mission, our life plan, as it's called, our birth path. But every choice we make, we are choosing with free will, whether to live to the higher end of our potential with love, forgiveness, open heart, compassion, belief, or to live to the lower end of our path and our potential by surrendering to our fear, our doubt, our anger, our pain. Now, of course, we're going to go back and forth and do those two things. That's the dilemma of being human. We can be enlightened one day and devastated the next. But once we've hit that higher expression of our path, of our potential, we end up going back there more and more because it's a happier place to be. It's the more fun, wise, loving place. And less frequently will we choose the lower end of that vibration of our path, or even of this year that's coming up. So I'm believing that because of my vision in 2014 of showing me there's always more light than darkness and the light is always winning, that in 2025, the light does win, and that our free will is going to be in alignment with that light. Does that answer your question, Mary?
Mhm. Thank you.
And also, we'll talk about that with soul agreements today too. And I'll move on to that unless anybody else has any other questions, because the soul agreements are, and again, another interplay between free will and destiny. So, for example, my soul agreement with my husband, Paul, who crossed in 1980, was the number 9. And so the 9, yes, it ended my life as I knew it, and it was a devastating loss. And yet, by going through that loss, I had a choice. Hey, am I going to spend the rest of my life angry and bitter? Or am I going to seek a higher meaning and step up to that, seek those answers that resonate, and try to follow a higher path here after the devastation of that 9 soul agreement? And of course, the potential is always there to go either way for all of us. But that's why we develop our spiritual tools, our meditation, our energy shifting techniques, our wisdom that we're seeking in all of these kinds of classes, books, Helping Parents Heal, IONS. We are seeking the wisdom of the higher way, the higher frequency, the higher self. And so, yes, this my soul agreement with Paul eventually brought me to be able to share wisdom with other people who are suffering and hurting. And that's what we're all here to do, to walk through our own dark nights of the soul, and to be able, when we're ready, to shift up to that higher frequency of our path, of our great potential, and bring it to the world as our healing gift. So we should get into our soul agreements. And I am opening my workbook here. 1 second. I made a whole workbook for um, the soul agreement work. Oh, great. So now, of course, I can't find it. So why don't you guys ask a question while I find it? Oh, that's not it.
I have a question, Sue.
Good.
Is there, as far as soul agreements with our like immediate families, like, is there always or a general like your your spouse is in a higher soul agreement than with your kids, or your parents are in higher soul agreement than you said?
No,
I mean, is there
I
anything
want you
like
to,
that?
no, I want you to think about it this way. We're all hanging out in the divine realms before this lifetime begins. And you and all of us as well, and our people who will end up being our family of origin, our children in this life, and our lovers, our husbands, our friends. We're all sitting around, and in the divine realms, we only know unconditional love for each other. We see each other's complete soul path, backstory, front story, the whole gamut, and we love each other completely. And we all sit around going, all right, so what's going to serve your highest good there? When you go back to Earth, what is it you're trying to learn? And you tell us, and then we all make an agreement to play an important role and a different role in your life to help you with that growth. And I personally believe that our children are probably our highest, most important soul agreements, because we might think we understand love until we have children, and then we really understand love. And we may think we understand loss until you lose a child, and then you really understand loss. So I do think in the scale of priorities, children are probably people's most important soul agreements. And I also believe that every generation that comes in, the children are the teachers, are the more advanced souls. And so when I look at Paul's agreement with me was to push me to grow. But when I look at my children, they push me in such incredible ways, comfortable and uncomfortable, and it continues on and on and on. And if I had to say who's been my greatest teachers, I would say it's my son and my daughter, even though Paul got me going on my path. So you can determine really what you feel is your most important soul agreement. So let me see if now I got the workbook open. So let me get it here. So this is the soul agreement workbook that I used in my latest class. And oh yeah. So all of you know that you can go to my birth path calculator, right? And if you don't know that, here's the link to it just to figure out your you guys can see my screen, my workbook, right? Yeah. So you can go to this soul path calculator and put in your date of birth and your loved one's date of birth and then add the two birth path numbers together and you get the soul agreement. And it's more explained here too. I do want to remind you of this though. I wrote this in the beginning of the workbook because in summary, this is the point of our soul agreements is that every relationship is a soul agreement made before the lifetime begins and for the highest good and growth of all of us, and that each of you signed up for the hurtful, painful relationships in your life, as well as the loving and wonderful and easy relationships. And you knew ahead of time that these painful ones were going to really push you to grow. And especially through grief, if you've lost someone through grief, that's a huge pushing to grow, no matter how painful it is. And when we cross, and you hear this all the time in NDEs and SDEs and OBEs, that when we're crossing, we see the backstory of everyone in our life. We do a soul review where we look back and say, oh, remember when I did that to that person, or that person did that to me. Oh, wow. Now I see their soul. Now I understand who they really were and are, and that we love each other. And I see the whole backstory of it. That is a view that we can't really get here in the dense energy of Earth, but it's definitely the view that we have when we're crossing over. And that is really the way to think of painful relationships. Here's a good question, ask the higher beings and the God source to show you what your soul is trying to learn from a challenging relationship. And tonight after class, you can take a moment and really write that answer down, ask your guides to tell it to you, keep that relationship in your mind, and then tonight do a little writing around it and just start by saying, I am trying to learn such and such from this relationship for highest good, and just start writing about it and you'll see where it takes you. So I'm going to go right to page 33 here to get to it's so interesting that it's page 33. Actually, nothing is interesting. It's all perfect and exactly mind-bogglingly divine order. So 33. So this is the simple way you add your own birth path to your partner's birth path. For example, 7 and 3, and you get the double digit number 10, and then you single digit that to 1. And that is your relationship number. Now, does anybody have a question about that, or are you guys all kind of good on that? And you can go ahead and unmute if you have a question. Okay, so I'm thinking that I should send you all, you're in my Patreon group, so I should send you this workbook. So I'll email it to you. Maybe I'll put it in the chat. That might be a good thing to do. Let's see. Copy. Gosh, I'm so used to having Margaret help me, and Margaret's not here. So let me see how I get back to the chat. So I got to stop share and put this in the chat. And that should work. That
So
you
is this from the numerology workbook that you
No,
sell on Amazon? It's a different,
no,
isn't
it's a
it?
different one that I made just for my soul agreement class. So click on that link I just put in chat and see if that opens for you. Does it?
That worked. That worked.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I did it without Margaret's help. I have a friend, Margaret, who's been taking all my classes for free, and in exchange, she's helping me do things like that. And she's been so helpful. I've almost gotten dependent on her. So anyway, yeah, use that workbook, and as it shows you in there, you can add your path and someone else's path and see the soul agreement. And I've given a summary of what those soul agreements are about in there. And then also, I just want you guys to lead with questions here, because many of you already know the numerology of this. And for example, I got a great question from someone saying, I am on the 9 path and my daughter is on the 9 path. That means we have a soul agreement of 9. What does that mean for the two of us? So you just heard me talk about my soul agreement with Paul. You know, it's a choice point of stepping up to the highest possible potential of your own path by using the challenge of the 9 soul agreement to really open you up to a great culmination of your wisdom and your healing. And it doesn't mean it's going to be an easy relationship if that person is still here on earth. You know, I have many 9 soul agreements with people here, and they're great. But then I've had many that have broken my heart as well. So it's all about the dance of free will and destiny. And it's also all about how each of you is expressing your highest self in this lifetime. So if you are in relationship with somebody who's not living up to their great potential, and you're doing your best to try to live up to your great potential, they may disappoint you for a while, and you've really got to let it roll off your back like water off of a duck's back, because they're just not ready. They're not ready to grow beyond where they are. And you can hold the light of love for them and wait. And just remember that when they come to you, your job is to be light and wisdom and loving in the best way that you can to help them step up. And that way you both fulfill that 9 soul agreement in the best possible way. Does that make sense, you guys?
Mhm.
So, let's see a question here. Pull this up. My fiance that passed was a life path 5 and I am a 6. Our soul agreement. Oh, your soul agreement is an 11/2. Melanie, can you hear me, sweetie?
Yes, I can.
Yeah,
Thank
you won the lottery with this, with your fiance who passed, meaning that you have the 11 soul agreement, meaning that that communication is absolutely pure intuition, higher frequency of the 11, the angel number 11, and that it continues, of course, beyond life and death. And you know, that 11 means that you should be able to communicate quite well with your fiance in spirit. Has that been true for you?
Oh, yes. 100%. I hear them all the time, but my abilities have completely opened since death. It's been an incredible journey. I understand that we don't die. I understand so much more, and it's been beautiful, and it continues to be beautiful. I know my guides and angels now, and it's Justin that started that journey and continues to guide me on the journey. So that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm. I love that. How long ago did he cross?
6.5 years.
Well, you're doing great, sweetheart. You really
Thank you.
are. That's so impressive.
he's helping me. I mean, it's incredible to see what I see. I never knew it. And so I'm grateful.
I think there's probably a lot of other people on here who can talk about their departed, also bringing them into a higher understanding. So let's start with that one soul agreement, since we'll start at the beginning. Anybody here have a one soul agreement with someone that they want to bring up and talk about? You guys are so quiet tonight. I don't blame you. I'm tired too. I'm actually still recovering from 2 conferences back to back and doing Alison Dubois today. So I'm in awe that I'm coherent at all tonight for all of you. So the one soul agreement, I want you to think of it this way. If you have a one soul agreement with someone, it's not like, for example, if it's in a relationship of marriage, it's not going to be one of those marriages where you merge paths with each other and you feel so deeply connected, you know, that you hear each other's thoughts and you just want to lose yourself in each other. It's much more like you're traveling parallel roads together, side by side, and they're not supposed to be the same path. They're not supposed to be completely immersed with each other, but they empower each other to be strong and independent and get on your own path. And many marriages work great with that one soul agreement because each person is on their fulfilled path and doing their great work and really in charge of their higher self and their soul running the show. And one of them is not thinking, oh, I'm lonely. I wish somebody was more loving and wanted to be with me more. Instead, they're both like, oh, this works for me. I need a little space here. And, you know, that's why I always say you can't judge good or bad by a soul agreement number. It really depends on the people traveling that soul agreement together. And then if your one path soul agreement is with someone in spirit, well, certainly they are empowering you to own your truth, own your life, own your highest good here on earth after they've crossed. And that's also, I've worked with grieving people that have that, and they feel like they say things like, yes, I've never felt so kind of awakened to me since my beloved crossed. And I really feel like I have agency in my own life for the first time. And that's often the soul agreement of the one with someone who crosses. Any questions about that one? So then we are, was somebody saying something there? No. And then we go to the soul agreement. We just talked about the 11 soul agreement. And the 2, if it's a 2 soul agreement without the 11, it still means there's that great connection, you know, that cooperation, that teamwork, that one-on-one ability to connect. And then when it has the 11 to it, it's just exalted, pushed up a few notches. And then we go to the 3 soul agreement, and the 3 is always about creativity and fun and exchange of great ideas. However, the downside of that is always going to be that you're too much in your head and not enough in your hearts. I was in a relationship with a partner once where we had a 3 soul agreement, and you know, people would interview us for different things together because we both worked in the natural foods industry, and they'd go, wow, what a power couple. You guys are so interesting and articulate. And, you know, we worked together really well that way with speaking and talking and ideas and business. And then you go home, and for us, the heart connection was missing. And for me, for some people, that would be fine. But for me, that didn't work. And my partner wasn't really willing to go into that heart connection. And so that's how the 3 soul agreement played out for us. But I also know other couples who really have a great time together and they do all of that stuff. And then they also are able to come home, quiet the mind, and connect heart to heart because they've worked on it. They've tried to make that their intention. Once we put something as our intention to people, especially, we're going to make it happen because we're both intending to open our hearts together. In fact, one person told me once that his wife they had that 3 soul agreement, and I'll probably get arrested for saying this, but they had learned to like smoke pot together or do mushrooms together so that it got them out of their heads and opened their hearts. And then they could really connect that way. And that worked for them. And then if we have the 4, go
Can
ahead.
can you tell me like what the difference might be if you have a soul agreement with someone and they're so like I'm a 1, my husband's an 11 too. So what's the difference? He's really much more in his 2 than his
Yeah.
11. So what's
Yeah.
the difference between that soul agreement if he's
It's it's great because I happen to know you two, and it's very fun and very creative and sparky and even intellectual. I know you've helped him with a lot of his books and all those things, but it's, Tess is working on him stepping more up to his 11, and that's certainly his call. And, the more he does that, and also as long as I've known you, I've watched him slowly stepping more up to that. And so, I do believe that as he gets more into his 11 self, and part of it is getting through the grief, and that's still definitely happening. But as he gets more into the 11, your 3 spark of soul agreement will come back more creative and more fun and more sparky and even more heart opened and heartfelt than ever. Or you wouldn't have agreed to this soul agreement. It's a great process for both of your highest potential. Does that make sense?
yeah. Thank you.
By the way, I love your photo. That's an art piece of
Thank you.
yours, isn't it? Look
I
at you
have a
being
feeling
so
I'm on the
you're being so tech savvy that you can make that your background. I love it.
I have a bad feeling I'm actually on the Helping Parents Heal account instead of my account because I did that for our meeting on the other night. So I'll have to fix that after we're done.
That's so great. Christy is an artist, you guys, and if you can see her background, that's one of her beautiful paintings. And if you're part
So
of
beautiful.
It is. And if you're part of Helping
Ye-
Parents Heal, you know that she runs the Art for the Heart group and meets, on Zoom and in person doing art for healing. And it's just magnificent work.
Yeah,
So
come join us on Facebook.
that's right. That's right. All right. So let's see. We were going into the 4 soul agreement, right? And the 22-4 soul agreement. So, excuse me. So when you have a 4 soul agreement with someone, it's going to be enduring. It's going to be strong. 4 is the number of strength and endurance and even hard work. And all those things come into play in that soul agreement, meaning that it's going to be an enduring relationship, but you will have to work on communication. You'll have to work on the higher elements of that agreement, and yet you can build a family on it. You can build a foundation on it. You can build a business on it. And some people say, oh, I have a 4 soul agreement with my business partner. And I always say that's great because you've got a strong foundation, but it is based in work and it's based in communication, and it's never going to be effortless. The 4 does require some work, and yet it's incredibly strong and enduring. So, any questions about that one? Okay. And then we go to the 22 soul agreement, and that is consciousness shifting material, just, brilliant, powerful stuff. And for example, if you're on the 11 and your partner's on the 11, you have that 22-4 soul agreement, and you're being called together to do work that helps shift consciousness in the world. And even if your child who crossed, or your fiance or loved one who crossed, if you're on the 11 and they're on the 11, they're going to be working with you from spirit to, bring that consciousness shifting work to the world. So then if we go to 5 soul agreement, the 5 soul agreement is so interesting to me because I know people who just really love that 5 soul agreement because it's passionate and it's sensual, and it's even it changes a lot, so it's never stagnant, you know. And then other people tell me that the changing nature of it is too much for them, that they don't want to dance in the water of change. And 5 is always an energy of change, expansion, and growth. So if I would say if your partner has a soul agreement of the number 5 with you, you have to learn how to dance in the passion, yes, the sensuality, yes, the enjoyment of the physical pleasures of life, but also the expansion of the soul, the growth of the soul that is being called for both of you to step up to. And of course, if your departed is in spirit and you have a 5 soul agreement, they are expanding your heart constantly through grief and through their communications. They are changing you completely with that 5 soul agreement. So there was a question in that chat I wanted to see. Oh, you were saying your boyfriend and you are a 5 soul agreement. So how does that feel, Melanie? How does that feel different?
So different, actually. I'm not very comfortable with it, to be completely honest. I think it started off like very passionate, like you said.
Right.
There's differences between us that are really uncomfortable, and I'm confused on what to do with it. And I thought, but I thank you for clarifying the 5 soul agreement, because I think it sounds beautiful and
Mhm.
kind of confusing, which is sort of how I feel about it.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
Melanie, remind me of your path number.
I'm a 633.
See, the higher part of your frequency is all about heavens and angels and connecting. And then you're the 6, which is about home and heart and health and healing and all that beautiful stuff and love. But a 5 soul agreement is a little bit askew of those energies of your path. And that's what you're feeling. It's almost like you're up at a choice point of, if you stay in that relationship with that soul agreement, is it going to pull you in some ways off of your 33 path? That's a question for each of us. And that's how we do evaluate these soul agreements. If it's a marriage or a friendship or a love interest, that's where we do get a choice. If it's our children or a family of origin or something, we don't have a choice. We're in it and we're learning from it.
I think I'm thinking about breaking up with him. So that's very interesting.
Totally understandable.
I feel very pulled off my path when I'm around him these days.
Yeah, I
So,
understand.
yeah.
That makes total
Thank you.
sense.
Thank you.
Yeah. And what personal year are you in?
I forget. The 7.
So
was
you're
it 8
definitely
or 8?
turning within and examining.
It's 7.
Yeah. And then next year is your 8 personal year. So you're going to be owning your power, claiming your power. You're probably going to dump him then.
Actually, I'm so sorry. I'm an 8 personal year because it's the same as the year now.
Okay.
believe.
Well, then you are going to dump him now.
Okay. Yes, I'm thinking about it.
And next year is the ending of it for sure. So, okay. So we were at, let's see, the 5. Let's do the 6 soul agreement. I love that soul agreement. It really means, and I've worked with a lot of people whose husband or wife is on that 6 and they've raised a beautiful family. They have that 6 soul agreement and they've raised a beautiful family, a home, a house, everything. But of course, the challenge of the 6 is that they're also constantly being pulled into the other person's needs. And often the women are the ones who kind of give up their own self, their own groundedness, their own power to make that 6 soul agreement work. Whereas it's supposed to be an equal, one partner giving up some things to make it work, another partner giving it up, and neither of them having to really surrender to the needs of the other. And I work with moms too, who have 6 soul agreements with children, and they'll report the same kind of thing, that their children has needed them and they've loved them so much that when the child is launched, they're still needing them so much, and that they're struggling to hold on to who they are and what their life is about. The 6 always calls us to center in our heart power, to center in our divine wisdom, to center, to think of the home and the hearth as being inside of our heart, and to go there for our center, our healing, and our wisdom, and not to let other people pull us off balance, even our primary relationships. Every soul agreement is meant to get each of us on our own highest path, not for us to ever give up our path or our purpose for another person. That isn't what we come to Earth to do. Any questions about, oh, and then the 33. So the 33 soul agreement is absolutely beautiful and brilliant. And the 33 means that you're going to together really seek that higher 33 consciousness. And, that's if you're living up to the highest frequency of it. And then the 33 can also be a little problematic too, because it's not very earthy, grounded, practical, all of that stuff. It's funny because I've had many really close girlfriends who I have that 33 soul agreement with. And yet it's not really a go to work together and, make it work. When I worked as a magazine editor, a VP of content, and I had a staff working for me. Um, without knowing birth dates, I had hired so many 4-path souls, and we were all 4-paths, and our agreements together were 8. Like we were managing our power and our success of the magazine together. And then I'd fall in love with a wonderful person who I had a 33 agreement with, but we were just lovey-dovey. We weren't really efficient in making things happen. So it's so fascinating to go back and study all of that in your life, examine all those relationships. If you've ever worked really well with someone, go figure out what that soul agreement is, and then track it back in your life and see where else it has shown up. And you'll learn a lot. And then it's funny because today Alison Dubois said to me, she said, Sue, you need to add a component to your soul path calculator. You've got to do a whole page on soul agreements. And when somebody puts in their birth date and their partner's birth date, if it comes up to a certain number, you need a pop-up video that goes, hold on, girlfriend, don't go to dinner with this person, and just tell them how to navigate it. And I totally get that. I think I might actually do that. But it does get tricky because, for example, I had a 9 soul agreement with Paul, and it didn't end well in the traditional way of thinking it, but I wouldn't be who I am today without it. I would not go back and change that. So that's why it's all much more complex than we want to think it is. And my own daughter is a 22-4, and she's madly in love with someone right now who she has a 9 soul agreement with. And when she asked me, she said, Mom, is this going to be good or a good relationship? I remember really thinking, how do I navigate that question? And I said, oh, it'll be very passionate. And, in the long run, yes, it'll be wonderful and you'll love it. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, I hope. Because it does have to do with our own journey and our own potential and what we're each living up to. So those videos might be a little harder to make than Allison thinks. So then we go into, let's see, where are we now? Are we in the 7 soul agreement now? So the 7 soul agreement, it's so interesting. The number 7, it's the most spiritually inclined number, also very analytical, perfectionist. And when you look at the number 7, it has sharp edges. And I really noticed that when people have a 7 soul agreement with someone, to the dark side of it, they can be extremely critical and cold and hurtful with each other. And yet when they bring it to the higher potential of its possibility, it's all about spiritual enlightenment. It's all about, pushing each other to grow in your spiritual self, which at the end of the day is the most important part of why we're here. So, but I do caution you, if you're in a 7 soul agreement with someone, be aware of being critical or too much in your head with that person, and instead really work on bringing it to the soul's wisdom, to the spiritual self. And then the eight soul agreement, it's going to be powerful and you'll never forget it. And hopefully you'll both be able to live up to the right use of your power in that relationship and empower each other and possibly work together, make money, all those good 8 things. And the downside of the 8 soul agreement is you're going to butt heads like crazy, and one person could, be abusive to the other. So it's that continuum. And again, it depends on the evolution level of each partner. And then we go to the 9 soul agreement, ultimate, alpha and omega. The omega is the 9, the culmination, the fulfillment of all desire, the fulfillment of all lessons. So is a 9 soul agreement good or bad? That's for you to determine. Whether it pushes you to grow and become a whole different person and be reborn, or it sinks you in your grief, your fear, and your pain. That's your choice. But it has a great, great potential. So any questions about those? Okay, any comments?
I have a quick question, Sue.
Yes.
When you're like looking at a soul agreement with someone who has passed,
Mhm.
do you like still take this current year in that calculator?
Well, the current year, no, we're not looking at the current year. In other words, so for example, going back to Paul, his path in this life was the 5 path. My path is the 4 or the 22/4. So our soul agreement is the 9. For as long as I'm here on earth, I'm still holding up part of that soul agreement. And even though he's in the divine and he's moved on, and he still comes back to teach me, because time and space is not linear. And he actually was a big part of my learning journey when I got cancer in April. So that, and that 9 soul agreement is all the hardest, highest lessons. So until I cross over and we go through our learning processes there and my soul evolves more, that 9 soul agreement is still in play. And as long as you're still here on earth, your soul agreement with that departed is still that same frequency. And as soon as you get it done, I always tell people, if you're longing to be with them, then step up to what that soul agreement is calling you to do, and you'll be able to have a possible you're done graduation exit point. I shouldn't say it that way. It's, everybody has their own exit point, and it can be hard or it can be okay, but we're not really going to leave until we've fulfilled that mission. Okay. All right, people. So I have a meditation, and I'm pretty sure I sent it to you, or else I posted it on Patreon, about going into the divine realms and seeing that beloved person that you're trying to heal that relationship with or understand that relationship with, and sitting down and really loving on them and connecting with them from the divine realms. In 5 minutes, I just want to take us back in there. And this time we're going to focus on a troubled relationship and on healing that relationship. So if you guys can hang on with me for 5 minutes, that's what we're going to do. So everybody, let's see, we'll mute. All right, everybody, let's just take 3 deep breaths here. And now we feel that absolute peace that comes when we quiet the mind and begin to recognize that, yes, there is that golden ball of God's love and light always within us, always at our core of who we are, that golden light emanating from every pore of our physical body. And that quieting the mind removes any blockages to us remembering that we are powerful divine beings who came here on purpose. And in this next breath, we fully acknowledge that our higher self, our soul, our divine essence is free of our physical body at any time to lift above and rise back up to the divine realms for healing, wisdom, and knowledge. And so in this moment, you take a breath and you lift up out of the physical body, feeling that freedom, that lightness, that easing up of any of the tension that you've carried in this lifetime, carried in this day, carried in this hour, all letting it go as you rise up those 10 stairs of golden light that we're so familiar with, taking us to the higher realms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now we move through the tunnel of light, which is where we always travel to peel off any remaining layers of trauma or pain from our physical life. And so we move through this tunnel towards the opening at the end, the light, where our departed loved ones wait, and our primary spirit guides and our angels. And so we move through this tunnel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now you come out into this great opening, this light. Hug your departeds, let them love on you. They're telling you you're doing so great, and they're so strong. They're standing in front of you so vividly, you can see them. And just reach in and touch them, hug them, laugh with them. And now just say to them and to your spirit guide, I need some help with something. And they're all acknowledging that, nodding. And so we sit down in this meeting place, this sacred circle of ancient stone benches. And the spirit guide says, how can we help you today? And so right now, tell your guide that you're struggling with a certain person in your life, and you really need to see it from the soul's view so that you can understand what you're trying to learn and how to navigate it with more grace and love. So right now, put that person here in the circle, because their higher self does live here in the divine realms, even if they're incarnated on earth. So call that person in from the earth realm. Have them sit right here. And now picture them. They're smiling at you more lovingly and radiantly than you have seen them smile at you for a long time. You're remembering their goodness. You're remembering their soul's beauty. You're seeing their pain. You're seeing how hard they've tried on earth to learn what they're learning and to be who they're becoming. You understand how hard it's been for them. Just acknowledge to them that you see them. You see their perfection and their imperfection, and you love them for all of it. And then just keep sending them so much love, compassion, and kindness. And say, I am breaking the pattern of misunderstanding that happens between us. I am erasing it for highest good. From this moment on, we will only see the divine in each other. We will not be threatened by each other. We'll realize that we're here to cooperate, to love on each other, and we will do so. And right now, see that person looking at you and nodding, yes, yes, I agree. Because they've struggled too in this relationship. They're hurting too. And in this moment, you're giving it an opportunity to transcend to its highest purpose. Hold them in that love for 1 minute more. Beautiful. And now thank them for cooperating in this with you. And now turn back to your guide and say, is there any other way you can help us with this as well? And see what your guide has to say, what advice they have for you. And now turn to your departed loved ones and say, whenever you see me falling into the older pattern of this relationship's dysfunction, give me a sign, remind me, pull me back up into the light. And your departed love you so eternally. Of course, they agree to this. But now, when you return to your body, you'll hardly be able to even remember what you were upset with this person for, because this physical lifetime is just a brief blip in your eternal soul journey and your eternal soul agreement with this person. So we are back to the long view as we thank everyone and turn and move back through the tunnel. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and down the stairs of light back into the body. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take a breath back into the body, knowing that you carry the healing, the wisdom, and the love that you just grabbed hold of in the divine. And you're pulling it into your heart here on earth. And from now on, when you interact with this troublesome person, you will just only remember this interaction that we just had in the divine. And so it is. Thank you all so much. I hope that meditation helps. And thank you, Melanie. And I think that's all, the only chat thing. Yes, okay. So I'll be teaching my soul agreement class again in the future, but you all have that workbook here that you can also use. And thank you all for coming tonight. I can tell that many of us are tired. Many of us were at the HPH conference and the IONS conference, and which those are both great things. But when I see you again in a few weeks, we'll all be restored and renewed. I love you all so much. Many, many blessings. And if you're part of the angelic ministry, please join our tomorrow night's Patreon group, which is going to be all about the angelic ministry. And if you haven't yet taken that angelic ministry class, you can still join us to learn about what we do in that class, because I have a new one starting at the end of the month, a live one. And I'd love it if you guys could join us. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Love you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Night, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night.